Hello, my name's Tom, back talking about F1 Fantasy, and in this video I'm going to be talking about my team selection for the Grand Prix ahead of Australia. Sorry for the terrible accent, but there we go. Yeah, we're going into Melbourne. This is my team as of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. I did make a change from Guan Yu Zhou to Sargent, which didn't pay off on this week, but I think in the long term, Sargent may be the better option. We're going to look at that kind of extensively in just a minute because, let's be honest, I don't think there's too much to talk about for the rest of the team. I'll be completely blunt. Red Bulls are so far ahead. They're literally miles ahead of everyone else on track. And I see no reason whatsoever to really change the triple Red Bull option. Perez is driving well. Verstappen's just an incredible driver and an incredible car. So why would you not want to put the two times like the DRS boost on him? And then Red Bull Racing, just an absolute bargain. They're the most costly constructor, but they're still just so they're just going to bag points on a consistent basis. So for me, this is kind of a template, particularly the Red Bulls. I don't see any need to change off that whatsoever. And then as for the Aston Martins, for me, like at the moment, they're basically like the second best team. Would you agree with that? Like at least second or third best team. Like who is even doing better than them? The Ferraris are clearly struggling a lot more than what we expected. We thought the Ferraris might be able to compete with the Red Bulls, but the reality is like they've actually dropped back. Like the Aston Martins have looked like they've leapfrogged the Ferraris. The race pace in the Ferrari is nothing compared to the way it qualifies, and that's really not very good for F1 fantasy. You don't want people qualifying high and dropping back, and that's what's kind of happening with the Ferraris at the moment. They just don't have that race pace ever since this technical directive back in Spa last year. Ever since then, like they've just been struggling, and I don't know if it's purely linked to that, but they really that it's having repercussions of their tyre degradation, and that obviously affects their general race pace. And they're just not very good at the moment in comparison to where we thought they would be. In contrast to that, the Aston Martins, we were like, will they be the third best team? Or I don't know. I think most people put them in fourth place. The reality is, after the first two races, that they are the second best team in my mind, and they're so cheap. I do genuinely think that the guys behind this game that made F1 Fantasy this year, they had testing to look at it, and I don't want to sound like a negative person, but they really, really messed up the pricing for Aston Martin, in my opinion. And because of that, it makes decision or team selection just really easy at the moment, in my mind, which is kind of unfortunate. I would like much more variety and be able to do different tactics. But in my mind, I think the Aston Martins are just so strong. They're so underpriced that for sure Aston Martin and Fernando Alonso are on the team. The only real small question mark in my mind is Lance Stroll. Obviously, there's the risk of DNF factor, which can hurt your team, and that did happen in Saudi Arabia. However, I do think that this is still, with Lance Stroll in there, it's still got the highest ceiling. If he didn't have that reliability issue, and the Aston Martins have proven to be reliable like all of last season, and we didn't really expect there to be a reliability issue for the Aston Martins in this race. I thought if there were going to be DNFs, it would be much more accident based. The streets of Jeddah are super high speed, the walls are close in. We've had a lot of sort of DNFs via accidents and crashes over the last 2 years, and I was so close to putting the no negative chip on last week, and I just couldn't quite push myself to do it. I don't know why. Just didn't go through with it in the end. Just kind of ran out of time. The deadline passed me by, and it was just like, yeah, couldn't pull the trigger on it, and it would have helped for sure. Like having Lance Stroll DNF definitely hurt, and that's going to be the same case going forward for every race. And obviously, Australia also not the safest of tracks. Another street circuit, it's a pretty fast-paced corners at various parts of the track. Definitely some big accidents here in the past, so it could be another temptation for me to use a no negative chip on this week. To be honest, it's going to kind of be like this for the rest of the season, I think, like especially when we're tripled up. And I think the no negative chip is kind of a bit of a rubbish chip, to be honest. And I kind of just wanted to get out of the way, and that's one of the reasons why I almost pulled the trigger on it in Saudi Arabia. Is that it's so hard to predict when your guys are going to DNF. We'll wait around for a wet race, we'll wait around for this and that danger or whatever, whichever is like a dangerous track. People are talking about Monaco. Maybe look at other tracks like Baku or something. I don't know. But then Jeddah obviously was one as well. There's lots of dangerous tracks. Let's face it. These guys are driving at 200 plus miles per hour. Every track is dangerous, but some more than others. And I do think that Melbourne could be another option to use a no negative chip. because we could see some more variety in our teams further down the line. And whilst we're heavily like tripled up on assets, using a negative chip while we're guaranteed to be tripled up, and like the likes of Aston Martin and Red Bull could be a good way to do it. The Red Bulls don't have a good record. I know they're flying at the moment, and they'll probably be fine this coming weekend. But the Red Bulls do not have a good record around the track at Australia. So yeah, it's another temptation for me to use a no negative chip. However, I still do think that Lance Stroll is the best option. The only other real option that you can like put in there with our current budgets is probably Pierre Gasly. And I think he's definitely a temptation just for a bit of spiced it up with a bit of variety. But I think on an average race weekend, that Lance Stroll versus Pierre Gasly in their current cars, I think Lance Stroll is just higher ceiling. He's gonna get more points on a more regular basis. So I think that Lance Stroll is probably the best option. Other people in this price bracket, Valtteri Bottas, the Alfa Romeo hasn't looked great, let's face it. I don't expect Bottas to score consistently high points. Oscar Piastri on his home race is a possibility, but the McLarens just really don't look good, do they? Just really don't look good, so I'm not sure about that. And then past that, you're into the budget drivers, and we can't afford anyone else up here. So it is really down to Pierre Gasly and Lance Stroll. And for me, although it's risky with like tripling up, I still think that Lance Stroll is probably the best option. And therefore, we're kind of stuck with the same teams for the foreseeable future. The only real option here is the budget driver, and I went with Logan Sargent because I thought he'd qualify low and then make his way up the grid as the race went on in Jeddah. And it did happen to some extent. He got really unlucky with his qualifying, getting the -5 fantasy points. What a bummer that is for not setting a time because his wheel was over one of the lines. It's pretty frustrating. I think his time would have been pretty good. I think it was good enough to get into Q2 or something like that. But either way, I think he looks like a steady driver. The Williams in general looks like it should be good reliability, although there is some cause concern for both the Aston Martins and the Williams because they both had their reliability DNF in Jeddah. So it's something to monitor. And there were some little rumours, just the odd tweet on Twitter about Fernando Alonso managing some sort of reliability issue in Jeddah as well towards the end of the race. So whether that's true or not, it's just something I saw on Twitter. So I don't know if I believe it or not. But yeah, so if there's some more creaks in the Aston Martin furniture, then we'll maybe reconsider in a race or two's time. But for me, the reliability issue is not really an issue at the moment until we see more evidence of it becoming an issue. So yeah, the only real option is the budget driver. And the best way I can pick out the budget drivers really is looking at the positions gained and overtakes and how many DNFs they're getting. So I'm keeping track of that on my spreadsheet down here. You can see the sort of bottom section is where like the budget drivers are in general. Because the only real way that the budget drivers can score points in this game is literally positions gained from where they're starting on the starting grid and then overtakes through the race. You can see here Guan Yu Zhou, if we highlight him down here, Guan Yu Zhou, 16 overtakes is miles ahead of everyone else after just 2 races. 16 overtakes is really impressive, and that's why a lot of people have gone with him, and I had him in the first race and I switched him to Sargent. But if you look in the positions gained plus or minus, he's actually one of the worst here on the grid so far. I know it's only two races, so it's a small sample size, but if we also go back to last season on the left hand side over here, you've got the stats from last season. You see Guan Yu Zhou here across the season, but points from positions gained hovered around that sort of break-even mark. Whereas you had other people like Stroll, Vettel, Ocon, the Williams drivers all had like quite a lot of positions gained. And I think we can see possibly the same sort of pattern repeating itself this year with the start of -5. So we could see the Alfa Romeos qualifying pretty well, but then falling back a little bit. But the fact that Guan Yu Zhou seems to be really good at overtaking is definitely a consideration, and makes him a temptation to bring him back in. But if we go down and have a look at Logan Sargent down here, I think his stats they look pretty good, to be honest. And I know he got unlucky in Jeddah with his starting position, and I guess it was kind of good because he started 20 and it enabled him to make up positions. But he did get the -5 for not setting a time, so that was a bit frustrating. I think in general, Sargent, he might even be competing for a Q2 qualifying position, the way the Williams is going at the moment, which is not a great thing at the moment for F1 fantasy. So if Sargent continues to not quite get into Q2, then it'll be fine. We should see quite a lot of these positions gained continue, which is great, because when you add these two up together, obviously 8 plus 10 is 18. You add his Guan Yu Zhou's -5 to his 16, that's only 11. So technically in these point scoring, Sargent's ahead of Guan Yu Zhou. It's only really because Guan Yu Zhou got the fastest lap back in Bahrain that he's proved the better asset so far. But I do think longer term, I think Sargent is the better option. You can see here Hulkenberg is in a lot of teams as well because of how well he's qualifying, and people see him doing well in the practice sessions and qualifying well, and they stick him in their team because they think he's going to get a lot of points. But you can see positions lost so far across the first 2 races, and -7. That is a joint worst alongside Piastri in this season so far, and that gives him a grand total of what, -7 add 6, so -1. It's not great, is it? Even though he's qualifying well. Magnussen, in contrast, has actually kind of gone the same way as Sargent with 7 and 9, but Magnussen's a little bit dearer, so I'm not sure he's going to fit into many teams. And then you've also got Albon, who is likely to qualify further up than Sargent. I think out of the Williams drivers, Sargent's cheaper, and is likely to qualify further back and therefore get those overtake points. So I think the truth is that I think that Sargent's probably the best option. The only other real options are Tsunoda and De Vries. Tsunoda's had a good start, but he still had look at the stinker of a season he had last year. I feel like it's inevitable that Tsunoda's going to have one of those races at some point, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Tsunoda can rebuild our trust a little bit. He's rebuilt our trust a little bit, I guess, so far the first 2 races. He looked a little bit more competitive, and hopefully there's a bit more reliability in AlphaTauri before I commit into picking them in my team. But also De Vries hasn't qualified particularly well, which has enabled him to get these positions gained. Just other people DNFing and a few overtakes adds up to a reasonable score. If you can get 5 or 6 points as a budget driver, then that's great. So yeah, this massive long head scratching debate about which is the best budget driver across the season, it's going to gain you an extra couple of points here and there. That's unfortunately the kind of the stage where we're at because our teams are all kind of similar. But for me at the moment, I think Sargent is probably the best option. So at the moment, this is what I'm looking at. Obviously, we've got the practice sessions to come, and things may change. I might change my mind, but I think I'm pretty set on the fact that Max Verstappen, Alonso, Perez, and the 2 constructors down here are kind of in my team. The only real 2 slots are Stroll and Sargent, and I'm still kind of happy with them as well. So then the decision becomes, do I want to use a no negative chip? That's something I have to think about because I do think the no negative chip is quite weak. And it's a bit of a frustrating chip to use because you use it and then you're kind of well, I kind of hope my drivers DNF because everyone's got the same team as me. And if they DNF and they haven't used a no negative chip, then I'm effectively gaining points on those people. If everyone's team looks the same and you've used a no negative chip, then it's gonna work out. So yeah, there is a temptation to use a no negative chip again this week. I'll be thinking about it. I'll see what happens in the practice session. See if my mind changes at all. But that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I'm afraid it's a little bit unexciting at the moment until some more upgrades come to the track and we have a little bit of a shake-up of the order, hopefully. Then I think this is the best team, and that's what I'm going to be going with for the time being. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, guys, and I'll catch you soon for another F1 Fantasy video. Thanks for your time, and catch you soon.